My name is John, 35 years old. My ex-wife left me and our kids to find herself, and 9 years later, she stormed their school, lied to staff, and had to be escorted out by police. 9 years ago, when my son, Ethan, was 6 and my daughter, Olivia, was 4, my ex-wife, Sarah, made a decision that would radically alter all of our lives. We had been going through a difficult period in our marriage. It wasn't totally her fault because I was working long hours and maybe wasn't the most attentive spouse. However, we were both trying to make things work for our families. Sarah's difficulty began when she started spending time with a group of friends from her yoga class. These women, who were either divorced or had never been married, appeared to have strong feelings about traditional family structures and the limits that marriage and motherhood imposed on a woman's personal development. These friends, particularly a woman named Maya, who had left her own family years before and was living what she called her authentic life, traveling the country in a converted van, began to fill Sarah's mind with ideas about how she was wasting her youth by being bogged down by domestic responsibilities. At first, I assumed it was a phase and encouraged her to go on weekend trips with these pals, even volunteering to take on more childcare responsibilities so she could explore her interests freely. However, rather than improving our relationship, this exacerbated it because the more time she spent away from home, the more distant she grew from me and the kids, and the more persuaded she became that she had made a terrible mistake by marrying and having children so young. The breaking point occurred during what I believed would be a family holiday to the beach. Rather than enjoying our time together, Sarah spent most of the trip on the phone with Maya and her friends, discussing how stuck she felt and how she needed to make huge changes before it was too late. Sarah told me on our last night at the beach, after the kids had gone to bed, that she had decided to leave us and start over somewhere fresh where she could discover who she truly was without the constraints of family life. She stated that Maya had offered her a residence in California and that she believed it would be best for everyone if she simply withdrew from our life rather than continuing to be a source of unhappiness. I was absolutely saddened and did everything to persuade her to continue with marriage counseling, individual treatment, temporary separation, and even an open marriage. But her mind was made up, and she saw any attempt to change her opinion as an attempt to control her and keep her from living her genuine life. The worst aspect was seeing how bewildered and heartbroken Ethan and Olivia were when Sarah told them she was moving away for a bit and would be staying with me. Though she vowed that this did not mean she loved them any less and that she would return to visit as soon as she was settled. Ethan continued wondering if he had done anything wrong to cause Mommy to want to leave, while Olivia wailed and begged Sarah not to leave. After Sarah departed, I found myself as a single father of 2 small children, dealing with abandonment issues and continually wondering when their mother would return home, all while processing my own feelings of betrayal and sadness. The first few months were difficult as I figured out how to balance employment, childcare, household chores, and my emotional well-being, all while assisting Ethan and Olivia in navigating their emotions and trying to provide stability in their lives. Sarah called on occasion over the first year, generally late at night when she had been drinking and felt bad. However, these chats were confusing and harmful for the children since she would make promises about visiting that she never kept. I eventually changed our phone number and requested her to stop calling because the intermittent communication was making things worse for Ethan and Olivia, who would get their hopes up, only to be disappointed when she left again. Around 3 years after Sarah departed, I met my present wife, Emily, at a school fundraiser where she was helping as Olivia's teacher, and what began as a friendship evolved into something deeper. Emily was extremely understanding of my baggage and the difficulties of dating someone whose children are still traumatized by their mother's leaving. What impressed me the most about Emily was how organically she connected with Ethan and Olivia, never attempting to replace their mother or force a bond, but simply being present and constant in such a way that they gradually came to trust her. She would help Olivia with her homework, attend Ethan's soccer games, and gradually integrate into our daily routines without feeling forced. After nearly 2 years of dating, Emily and I began discussing adoption. Emily was determined to be a parent, regardless of what occurred between her and me. The adoption process was simple because Sarah had practically vanished and made no attempt to maintain touch or provide financial assistance, which was legally considered abandonment. When the adoption was completed last year, it was one of the best days of our lives. Ethan and Olivia, now 15 and 13, have developed into great teenagers who have formed a strong attachment with Emily, whom they refer to as Mom, without urging from us. They recall their birth mother, but those memories have faded and been replaced by the reality of their current family. And they see Sarah as a character from the distant past rather than someone who is currently relevant to their lives. Sarah appeared at our front door 3 weeks ago, looking older but otherwise unchanged, claiming she had been thinking about us constantly and had finally realized that leaving was the biggest mistake of her life and that she wanted to return and be a part of our family again. She explained that she had spent 9 years traveling the country, working various jobs, exploring different lifestyles and relationships in an attempt to find herself, but nothing had provided the satisfaction she expected. And she had gradually realized that the happiness she was looking for had always been right here with us. I was surprised to see her because I thought she had moved on entirely. I invited her in for coffee and asked Emily to come home early so that we could discuss how to deal with this together. Emily was wonderfully cordial despite her discomfort with Sarah's unexpected reappearance. Sarah appeared really sorry and admitted she had made a terrible mistake. But she also had unrealistic expectations about being able to just return to our lives as if the previous 9 years had never happened. She expressed a desire to spend time with Ethan and Olivia, take them on outings, help them with homework, attend school activities, and gradually reestablish the mother-child relationship she had abandoned. The real test came when Ethan and Olivia returned home from school and discovered their biological mother sitting in the living room. The children's emotions were fast and obvious. Ethan became obviously agitated and questioned Sarah why she had returned and whether she wanted them to simply forget everything and welcome her back, while Olivia hid behind Emily and refused to look at Sarah. Both children made it plain that they had no desire to have a relationship with Sarah and considered Emily to be their natural mother. Sarah was upset by their rejection and attempted to explain that she understood their outrage and was prepared to take things carefully. But Ethan intervened, saying there was nothing she could do to compensate for the 9-year absence and that they already had a mother who cared for them. After Sarah left, Emily and I had a lengthy chat with the kids about what they wanted us to do, emphasizing that we would support whatever decision they made and that they should not feel compelled to have a connection with Sarah if they did not wish to. Both Ethan and Olivia were insistent that they wanted nothing to do with Sarah, didn't want her coming to our house or contacting them at school, and asked us to make sure she realized they were content with their existing family and didn't need her. So, this is where I might be the problem. I phoned Sarah and informed her that while I understood her desire to reconnect, the kids had expressed their feelings clearly and I would respect their wishes rather than force them into a relationship against their choice. I explained that they were old enough to make their own decisions about who they wanted in their life, and that after 9 years of having a solid family with Emily, they didn't want to break it for someone who had voluntarily left. Sarah grew enraged and accused me of poisoning the children against her, stopping her from exercising her parental rights, and threatening legal action to compel visits or seek partial custody. Though I'm not sure she has any legal standing after abandoning them and allowing Emily to adopt them. I honestly don't know if I'm doing the correct thing. And I keep second-guessing myself, because while I believe Sarah's sudden desire to be a mother again stems from guilt rather than genuine care for Ethan and Olivia's well-being, I wonder if I'm depriving them of the opportunity to connect with their original mother. Following the sensible comments I received, I decided to schedule consultations with a family attorney and an adoption therapist to ensure I was approaching this with Ethan and Olivia's best interests in mind rather than simply responding emotionally. The legal session was extremely informative and a big relief because the attorney confirmed what many had suggested. Sarah's legal rights as a parent were essentially terminated when she abandoned the children, and Emily was free to adopt them without Sarah's permission. In our jurisdiction, parental rights can be revoked for abandonment if a parent has not communicated for more than a year and has failed to provide financial assistance, both of which plainly apply to Sarah. Practically speaking, Sarah has no legal standing to demand visitation or custody. And any attempt to challenge the adoption would require her to demonstrate that she was prevented from maintaining contact against her will, which is obviously not the case because she chose to leave and made no effort to stay in touch. I phoned Sarah to have a straight chat about the truth of the issue, believing that if I communicated the legal realities and the children's choices, she would recognize that continuing with this would be pointless and potentially damaging. The talk did not proceed as planned, but it did provide insight into Sarah's thoughts. When I explained that adoption had legally terminated her parental rights, Sarah became enraged and accused me of using legal jargon to keep her separated from her children, as if the adoption was a bureaucratic ruse rather than a natural result of her neglect. What became evident was that Sarah had created a narrative about her leaving that minimized her culpability while emphasizing external causes, such as her friends' recommendations and mental health issues. She continued referring to leaving as something that happened to her rather than a decision she made. And she appeared shocked that there would be long-term effects. She also had excessive hopes for repairing ties with Ethan and Olivia, mentioning her desire to take them on excursions and assist with college plans, as if the previous 9 years had been a minor interruption rather than the majority of their conscious memories. When I explained that both children had made it clear that they did not want contact and that I would respect their wishes, Sarah burst into tears, saying she understood their anger, but was a different person now and deserved a chance to prove she could be the mother they needed. Instead of threatening legal action, Sarah inquired whether there was any way to contact Ethan and Olivia indirectly, such as through letters or phone conversations, so that she could apologize without forcing them to meet in person. I assured her I would talk to Emily and the kids about it, emphasizing that any communication would be fully voluntary and could end at any point if it became unpleasant. When I brought this up with Ethan and Olivia, their reactions were varied, but just as strong. Olivia determined, after several family discussions and a therapy session, that she would accept Sarah's phone number and possibly chat on occasion. But only if Sarah knew that this did not imply Olivia desired a relationship or was open to in-person encounters. Ethan remained adamantly opposed to any contact, and I made it clear to Sarah that she had to follow his decision entirely. So, I gave Sarah Olivia's phone number yesterday, and Ethan agreed to offer his number as well. But he made it clear that he was not pledging to answer calls and might change his mind at any time. I also put clear limits on when and how frequently Sarah might call, asking her to limit contact to once or twice a week and to avoid calling during school hours or late at night. Sarah was extremely happy for this compromise and vowed to respect the kids' boundaries and not press them for more interaction than they were comfortable with. Though I'm uncertain that she'll actually adhere to these restrictions given how eager she seemed to want to reconnect. I'm not sure whether I made the correct decision. Part of me is concerned that any interaction may give Sarah false optimism that she would be able to work her way back into a more major role, leading to further disappointment and conflict. At the same time, I don't want to make this decision for Ethan and Olivia, especially when Olivia showed genuine interest in limited contact. I guess we'll see how this goes, but I wanted to inform everyone who has been following our situation and let you know that your advice about prioritizing the children's mental well-being has been quite helpful. We had agreed to allow Sarah limited phone contact with the understanding that communication would be purely voluntary and that she would adhere to our established frequency and scheduling guidelines. For the first few days, it appeared to operate fairly effectively. Sarah contacted Olivia twice this week, and she answered both times, engaging in brief but polite chats about school and her interests. Olivia later told me that the chat seemed awkward and forced, and she didn't know what to say to someone who was essentially a stranger, but kept referring to herself as Olivia's mother. Ethan kept his word and refused to answer Sarah's calls, finally blocking her phone after she called numerous times in one day, which I thought was a sensible method to preserve his boundaries. The problem began this week when Olivia, dealing with midterm exams and a big presentation she was nervous about. Stopped answering Sarah's calls because she was busy studying and didn't have the emotional energy for what she described as awkward conversations with someone who doesn't really know me. Instead of understanding that a 13-year-old may have other priorities, Sarah became increasingly anxious about not reaching Olivia and began calling more frequently. Olivia showed me some of these voicemails, which were troubling since Sarah seemed very passionate and almost frantic, stressing about how much she missed Olivia and how essential these discussions were to her mental health and hopes of mending their relationship. One letter particularly disturbed me because Sarah stated that she had been looking forward to their conversations all week and that not hearing from Olivia was bringing back all of her feelings of loss and sorrow. When I asked Olivia about the voicemails, she revealed that they were making her feel guilty and worried and that she was beginning to regret agreeing to any contact since she thought Sarah expected more than she could or would give. She admitted that talking to Sarah seemed like homework rather than something she wanted to do. I informed Olivia that she owed Sarah nothing and that she could stop receiving calls at any time without feeling guilty. And we agreed she would take a break from phone communication to focus on her academics and give herself time to consider whether she wanted to continue with this arrangement. But instead of respecting Olivia's need for space or asking me why calls weren't being answered, Sarah made a decision that absolutely shattered any trust one had in her ability to prioritize the children's needs over her own. Yesterday afternoon, I received a call from Olivia's school counselor informing me that an unknown woman had arrived at the school, claiming to be Olivia's mother and demanding to see her, and that the school had to call security when the woman became agitated and refused to leave when told she was not authorized to visit Olivia. Apparently, Sarah went to the school office around lunch and informed the secretary that she was Olivia's biological mother and needed to meet with her daughter due to a family emergency. When school personnel examined their records and discovered that Emily was listed as Olivia's mother in emergency contact, they informed Sarah that she could not see Olivia without formal consent. According to the counselor, Sarah grew enraged and began arguing with staff, claiming that there had been an error in their records, that she was Olivia's biological mother and had every right to see her kid, and that the school was interfering with her parental rights. Sarah appears to have attempted to hunt for Olivia on her own, strolling down corridors and looking into classes, prompting the school to call security and eventually police to accompany her off campus. Olivia was clearly unhappy and embarrassed when I picked her up from school, and she kept questioning why Sarah had gone to her school and whether Sarah would continue to show up in places where Olivia was supposed to feel safe. She also stated that she felt it was somehow her fault for not returning Sarah's calls, which broke my heart because a 13-year-old should never feel accountable for an adult's inappropriate actions. I immediately contacted Sarah and told her unequivocally that attending Olivia's school was utterly unacceptable, that she had breached every limit we had set and undermined our faith in her. I stated that Olivia had been terrified by her actions, which had resulted in the very drama we were attempting to prevent. Sarah's reaction was defensive and emotional, stating she was worried about Olivia because she hadn't heard from her in several days and just wanted to make sure Olivia was okay and that she hadn't meant to put her under pressure with the voicemails. She stated she had no intention of causing trouble and had informed the school there was a family emergency since she didn't know how else to gain Olivia's attention. When I pointed out that there was no family emergency and that she had essentially lied to school officials and attempted to circumvent safety protocols, Sarah said that not being able to communicate with her daughter felt like an emergency to her, and she didn't understand why everyone was making this so difficult when all she wanted was a relationship with her children. This response demonstrated how profoundly Sarah misunderstood the situation and how self-centered her approach has been. She sees any impediment to immediate access to Ethan and Olivia as an unfair violation of her rights as a mother, rather than acknowledging that her children are persons with their own feelings and rights to privacy and safety. I informed Sarah that her behavior at school had precluded any potential of ongoing phone communication and that she needed to stay completely away from our family, including not showing up anywhere where the kids could be. I also told her that if she crossed these boundaries again, I would file a restraining order. Sarah became enraged and began crying, accusing me of being cruel and exploiting her mistake to punish her and keep her separated from her children indefinitely. But I made it obvious that this was not about punishment. It was about protecting Ethan and Olivia from someone who had demonstrated an inability to respect their autonomy or put their well-being ahead of her own. Following the incident, both children have made it clear that they do not want to contact Sarah again. Olivia appears relieved that she no longer has to worry about meeting Sarah's standards. I'm honestly punishing myself for agreeing to any contact at all because I should have realized that someone who abandoned her children for 9 years and then showed up wanting an immediate relationship most likely had the emotional stability to accept sensible boundaries. I'll keep you posted on whether Sarah maintains the no-contact boundary or if we need to seek legal protection, but for the time being, we're focused on making Ethan and Olivia feel safe and secure, as well as reminding them that Sarah's behavior is not their responsibility. Following the school incident, we implemented strict no contact with Sarah and made it clear to both kids that they no longer needed to worry about managing her expectations and could focus on their normal lives without the stress of navigating a relationship with someone who had demonstrated an inability to respect their boundaries. For about a week, this seemed to work well, and both Ethan and Olivia appeared happy to have the matter settled in a way that allowed them to move forward without constant worry about whether Sarah would call or show up suddenly. However, Olivia approached me and Emily on Friday evening with a request that astonished both of us and that I'm still not convinced we handled properly. Olivia told us that she had been thinking about Sarah's voicemail from before the school incident and that while she didn't want to have an ongoing relationship with Sarah, she felt she needed to call her once to clearly explain her decision and tell Sarah directly that she didn't want any further contact rather than having me communicate this message on her behalf. Olivia expressed guilt about how things had ended with Sarah being escorted off school grounds and then informed through me that all contact had been terminated and that she believed Sarah deserved to hear directly from Olivia why she did not want a relationship, even if the conversation was difficult and final. Emily and I went over this extensively with Olivia, making sure she understood that she didn't owe Sarah an explanation and that protecting her own well-being was more important than controlling Sarah's emotions. We also discussed the risk that calling Sarah would offer her false hope or that Sarah would take advantage of the situation to pressure Olivia for greater contact. Olivia was, however, quite clear about her goals and appeared to have properly considered the potential hazards. She claimed she wanted to tell Sarah that while she didn't hate her and understood Sarah's remorse for leaving, the harm had been done and too much time had passed for them to form the mother-daughter bond Sarah seemed to desire. We agreed that the call would be made on speakerphone so Emily and I could monitor it and help if necessary, and Olivia would have a written list of points to make so she wouldn't get sidetracked if Sarah became emotional. The call took place on Saturday afternoon, and it went both better and worse than we expected. Olivia was extremely mature in explaining her feelings to Sarah, telling her that she appreciated Sarah's apologies and desire to make amends, but that she had built a life and family without Sarah, and she didn't want to change that or jeopardize the security and happiness she had found with Emily as her mother. Sarah, to her credit, listened without interrupting or arguing and appeared to accept Olivia's final decision. I immediately contacted Sarah and told her unequivocally that attending Olivia's school was utterly unacceptable, that she had breached every limit we had set and undermined our faith in her. I stated that Olivia had been terrified by her actions, which had resulted in the very drama we were attempting to prevent. Sarah's reaction was defensive and emotional, stating she was worried about Olivia because she hadn't heard from her in several days and just wanted to make sure Olivia was okay and that she hadn't meant to put her under pressure with the voicemails. She stated she had no intention of causing trouble and had informed the school there was a family emergency since she didn't know how else to gain Olivia's attention. When I pointed out that there was no family emergency and that she had essentially lied to school officials and attempted to circumvent safety protocols, Sarah said that not being able to communicate with her daughter felt like an emergency to her, and she didn't understand why everyone was making this so difficult when all she wanted was a relationship with her children. This response demonstrated how profoundly Sarah misunderstood the situation and how self-centered her approach has been. She sees any impediment to immediate access to Ethan and Olivia as an unfair violation of her rights as a mother. Rather than acknowledging that her children are persons with their own feelings and rights to privacy and safety, I informed Sarah that her behavior at school had precluded any potential of ongoing phone communication and that she needed to stay completely away from our family, including not showing up anywhere where the kids could be. I also told her that if she crossed these boundaries again, I would file a restraining order. Sarah became enraged and began crying, accusing me of being cruel and exploiting her mistake to punish her and keep her separated from her children indefinitely. But I made it obvious that this was not about punishment. It was about protecting Ethan and Olivia from someone who had demonstrated an inability to respect their autonomy or put their well-being ahead of her own. Following the incident, both children have made it clear that they do not want to contact Sarah again. Olivia appears relieved that she no longer has to worry about meeting Sarah's standards. I'm honestly punishing myself for agreeing to any contact at all because I should have realized that someone who abandoned her children for 9 years and then showed up wanting an immediate relationship most likely had the emotional stability to accept sensible boundaries. I'll keep you posted on whether Sarah maintains the no-contact boundary or if we need to seek legal protection, but for the time being, we're focused on making Ethan and Olivia feel safe and secure, as well as reminding them that Sarah's behavior is not their responsibility. The call came from a hospital social worker in the city where Sarah has been living, informing me that Sarah had been admitted to their psychiatric unit following what appeared to be a suicide attempt and that I was listed as her emergency contact from when we were married, despite the fact that we had been divorced for 9 years. According to the social worker, Sarah overdosed on prescription medication on Monday night and was discovered by her landlord after failing to pay her rent. She had written a note apologizing for the anguish she had caused her family and admitting that she had lost her children forever and could not live with the guilt and remorse of her decisions. I was utterly surprised and frightened by this news. And my initial thought was that Olivia's phone conversation had somehow caused Sarah's suicide attempt and that I was guilty for putting Sarah in a dangerous mental condition by supporting Olivia's choice to discontinue communication forever. I've just told Emily thus far. I then called the hospital social worker to describe our family situation, which included Sarah abandoning the children 9 years ago and any contact with her being painful and destabilizing for them. I instructed the social worker to tell Sarah that while we hoped she would receive the necessary mental health therapy, we would not be visiting or participating in her care in any manner. I also gave the social worker the contact information for Sarah's sister, who lives across the country, but may be able to provide family support during Sarah's recovery, because I felt Sarah shouldn't be completely alone during this crisis, even if we couldn't provide it ourselves. The social worker was very understanding of our situation and assured me that the hospital staff would not pressure us to have contact with Sarah against our will, but would instead focus on connecting her with appropriate mental health resources and support systems that did not involve her children. It's been a few days since that phone call, and I'm still wondering if we could have handled this situation differently. If there were warning signs we overlooked and if protecting my children from Sarah's instability was worth the risk that she would harm herself as a result of feeling completely rejected. I wanted to update everyone who has been following our story because this development clearly alters the nature of the situation, and I'm hoping that sharing our experience will be beneficial to other families dealing with similar challenges involving estranged parents who want to reconnect with children who have moved on with their lives.